The Sustainable Voice, bringing you big successes from small places worldwide.
Hey, Leigh, welcome back.
Hi, Ashish.
Well, we have a reflection. We have somebody in the room again, somebody in the studio again that he was here a while ago, and you know what? His last recording with us went pretty viral on social media. So did your daughters, because people like to hear from him more than they liked hearing from us. So we decided to have him back. So Shiv, welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Or thank you for having me back, everybody.
See, look at him! What a pro!
Uh, yeah, it's glad to be back. I'm glad that the other podcast, the other video went well, and I'm glad to reciprocate the same energy in this video.
Oh, it's gonna be awesome. You're gonna kill it here. We're going in your wheelhouse. And full disclosure to everybody, since our last recording, this young man has graduated cum laude from his high school and is heading. Where are you heading, Shiv?
To the University of Florida, go Gators!
Oh, there it is. There it is. So, as his father, I got to watch Shiv grow up, and it was such a proud moment watching him graduate. And it's the hardest thing is keeping your mouth shut because you want to tell everybody and you want to brag. You're like, no, 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 no. But that's the hardest part because you're so proud of this kid and everything that he's, just you watched him grind and work and whatnot, and it was really cool. A few days ago, we were at somebody's house, and one of Shiv's friends and the father said, "I had no idea Shiv was ranked that high. I was so freaking proud of that kid." And I'm like, "Well, he put his head down and just got to work." And so I realized something when I saw how high Shiv ended up at school. He's definitely adopted. He cannot be my son.
You told me that all credit went to his mother.
It 100% goes to his mother. 100%.
Mhm.
Why are you agreeing, Shiv? Wait a second. Why are you agreeing?
You're the
Hold
one
on.
saying it. I'm just agreeing on the same page.
Yeah, you
We're
agreed a
on
little
the
bit
same
too
page.
fast there. Hold on. You agreed a little bit too fast. I distinctly remember a rock with a poison snake that was underneath it correcting geometry problems for you. So hold on a second. Wait. But it does go to his mother. That's for sure. That's because I'm not there. I'm always traveling. But you see how fast he just quickly goes. Yep. Yeah, that's.
As a mom, I think, let your mom take that credit, Shiv.
I'm outnumbered
Right.
here.
Yeah.
I'm totally outnumbered here. At two brute, Shiv, you're supposed to have my back, dude.
We're on the same page here then.
Wow. All right. There it is. All right. Well, with that, hold on. Let me pull the knife out of my back and then let's get going into everything else. So we're going to be talking specific today about it's a different topic and one that really Shiv's the only one on this podcast qualified to talk about, which is CubeSat technology. Now, I can already see the keyboard commandos jumping on social media and saying, what exactly is CubeSat? So Shiv, for all the naysayers and people who are going to basically start, lambasting me on social media after this goes live, go ahead and tell them what this is.
Absolutely. So, as we all know, satellites are a very, very big popular thing that companies like SpaceX, Lockheed Martin, NASA, they're all putting up right now. However, they do cost a lot of money. And for people like me and normal people, like the other people on this podcast, they cannot afford to put up a satellite. The solution to that is a CubeSat. It is a one-by-one cube filled with other technology, metrics, and that can be GPS, cameras, etc. And it's a cheap alternative to sending their projects up into space. And usually it goes up with other rockets. They pay a little bit to go up with them, but they don't pay for a whole rocket individually, and they don't take a huge mass of the payload. So again, like I said, it's a very cheap alternative to be able to have your projects and have your experiments at a lower cost to do certain tests in space.
Who would use this?
Most likely students, some groups in high school, but mainly colleges around the United States. One of the biggest ones is Princeton University. They have the biggest program in the United States, and they started the whole movement of sending out CubeSats into outer space.
What kind of projects were they doing there? What kind of experiments?
They've done a wide variety of projects. I don't remember any for Princeton, but I do know there is one for the Naval Academy. I believe they're working on a type of radio frequencies where it would be a bit more accessible throughout the world. And for my group, Wolfpack CubeSat Development Team, we were working to see which bacteria ate away plastic the fastest in outer space. And we tried to find that out, of course, in a CubeSat, which we put up in outer space.
Hang on. His mom listens to this podcast. So, Pervy, that's all I'm going to say. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay.
So-
And I have to, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I got to hear Shiv talk about this because, so he knows what he's talking about here because he was explaining it to me. And I told him, explain to me like you're talking to a 2-year-old, because he probably was when he was talking to me. But I told him to explain it like he's talking to a 2-year-old. And he explained it down to the basic levels, like he just did for all of our, our listeners who don't know about CubeSat technology to be able to understand. Shiv, if I summarize it, would you say basically it's a timeshare for space? Yeah, Leigh, you got that, right?
It's exactly what I was getting ready to ask. It sounds like timeshare. It sounds like a timeshare.
Yep, it's a 1-by-1 timeshare. It's the smallest condo in space ever.
Yeah.
So this is so cool because when I last year I was rushing back from Peru and I went up and Shiv was actually presenting at the Kennedy Space Center, which of course proud dad moment. Shiv, why don't you talk about that for a second? Because you had a really cool thesis that was accepted, and you were presenting to a room full of some pretty smart individuals, and I thought your thesis was pretty powerful. But go ahead and share what that was.
So currently, just to give you a background, satellites, mainly SpaceX, the ones that we have, what is that? Starlink, obviously. They put their satellites in a layer of the atmosphere called low Earth orbit, and it's a pretty low area of the atmosphere. So the drag that happens, and I don't want to get too scientific because it'll get kind of confusing.
Go, man, go.
But just to give a brief understanding, it allows for a cheaper quality or a cheaper price to send the satellite up because you're at a much lower level within the atmosphere. But my project was on very low Earth orbit, which is a level right underneath it. And there's not a lot of satellites in that, but it's a presentation on what the benefits and drawbacks might be of putting satellites in that orbit. And one of the biggest benefits was that there was a big price deduction when you put satellites in orbit rather than low Earth orbit and above. And that was mainly because you didn't need as much fuel to get up there. One of the biggest drawbacks, though, was the atmospheric drag. And what that means is when you're a plane or you're driving a car really fast, you stick your hand out the window and it's a lot of push that goes against your hand. It's the same kind of thing. And it begins to deteriorate your satellite after a while. When you're much closer to the surface, the rate at which the deterioration happens, it will be a lot quicker when you're in very low Earth orbit. So I wanted to kind of compare the benefits and drawbacks between this level of atmosphere. And it was a lot more than just that. It was prices, it was variable costs, it was the scientifics behind it and what solutions had been made to assist in those problems. But yeah, I had the opportunity to do that in October at the International CubeSat Education Conference, I believe that's what it was called. And that's when I talked to a lot of other educated individuals about this topic.
So one thing I will say, and this, we had an episode with Caroline and Shivan. We were talking about world citizens, right? Global citizens. This counts. This is part of that. So Shiv was actually solving a problem that we all know exists in space with space junk. Shiv, let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yes. So, as you know, we started launching satellites, and this includes Russia, in the 60s and 50s. And as a result, since then, right, there's a problem where there's might be too many satellites. There's so much orbital debris where they're crashing with each other, and it's a hazard for astronauts that might be in space, that might be in the field. And if you guys have seen Gravity, you know what I'm talking about, where there's orbital debris hitting the satellite and literally causing people to die. That is the problem that's at hand right now. And one of the biggest solutions is lowering the amount of satellites and lowering the launch site of where the satellites can be. And the biggest thing is that it's almost self-cleaning, in the sense that satellites can only last for so long in this in this atmosphere, in this level, because right now they're at a range where they can last for forever. Whether they're dead or alive, it doesn't matter. They can stay there forever, and it causes a hazard. When you're in very low orbit, there's not as much as a hazard because it'll be destroyed and sent back to Earth within a couple of years.
That's the atmospheric drag you're talking about.
Exactly, that's atmospheric drag.
Yeah, and Shiv was actually showing me something that, the satellites, the space debris that's traveling around the Earth, the one that's that space junk, it's not traveling at 10 miles an hour. Go ahead, Shiv.
Yeah, it's actually, if you guys can look at it right now, there's a website called Satellite Tracker 3D. I have it pinned to my laptop right now. If you look it up, it'll show you a global image of all of the satellites, and you can look through each one, where they're from, what they do, what their purpose is, when they were launched, all that stuff, and you'll see how many satellites are actually around the Earth right now, and it'll really give you a suggestive of what it looks like.
Any idea how fast these things are going? The ones that are just floating up there?
They're going. I don't know a number, but I'll tell you they're really fast. They're a lot faster than things like the moon because they're a lot closer. But yeah,
here's what Shiv's professor told me: 87,000 miles an hour.
That's fast.
That's what
I have I'm obsessed with this astronomy app that is called Skyview, and I look at the stars a lot with that. But I'm also amazed at the space junk it identifies and shows, and I can see how fast it's going. I can hardly keep track of it. It's pretty.
Well, and I was looking at that site when Shiv showed it to me, and it was just that. It was, you're learning from all of it, but all this, we saw satellites, right, Shiv, that had been used in 30 years. They were dead for 30 years. Weather satellites and what? Which one was
the
it?
Sputnik satellites that were first launched by Russia, they're still up there. They haven't been destroyed.
They're dead. And I asked the professor, 87,000 miles. I said, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Look, when you actually count gravitational pull, when you count the coefficient drag, when you count everything, put it all together, not just sheer speed, because our land speeds of miles per hour, that actual definition doesn't apply to space. You got to take everything else into equation, and then you get that figure of 87,000 miles an hour." And that's the thing. Now, I will digress for 1 second before we get into the topic, because you mentioned the movie Gravity. You know who's seen the movie Gravity way too many times? I'll give you one guess. She kissed the ground, by the way. I kissed the ground and I liked it. Oh, sorry. All right.
Oh boy.
Do you remember who you know who I'm talking about, right? Katy
Perry. Yep.
Miss Perry, if you're listening to our podcast, thank you for listening. You should probably skip this episode. Listen, you were up in space for 7 minutes. To come down and say that you're trailblazers, it didn't go over so well. And kissing the ground after you got back, listen, Sandra Bullock beat you to it, and she did a better job doing it. So please stop, right? And why this is important. I mean, I think, Shiv, is Katy Perry your favorite singer as well? Didn't think so. Didn't think so. But hang on, Leigh, you actually took your daughters to a Katy Perry concert.
It was one of the best concerts ever. She is an amazing performer, and it was
clearly we saw it on TV when she kissed the ground.
I know, and I love her as a performer. And it wasn't just her; it was all of them. I just got a little offended by how they referred to themselves as trailblazers. That's all. I mean, space tourism, go for it. If it helps all of us raise some awareness, that's great. But it was a little tough to deconstruct afterwards.
Yeah, and you know what? And I agree. Look, she's a great performer. Nobody's taken away from the fact that she is a great performer, that she has accomplished a lot. And I would say that in certain fields in music, she is a trailblazer. But for this, it makes... What about Sally Ride? What about everybody who came before her? What about Kalpana Chawla, who actually passed away when the shuttle Columbia exploded on the way in, on re-entry? What about her? Because wasn't she a trailblazer? Wasn't Christy, oh gosh, what was her name? The teacher that went up on the Challenger in 80 McAuliffe, Christy McAuliffe. What about her? Yeah. The first teacher in space, and she sacrificed her life. Isn't she a trailblazer? There are so many other people.
I mean, I would like to think that they, as women, they weren't trying to take away from that. Sure. It's just that they they could say they're trailblazers in space tourism,
Sure.
but they can't lay claim to some of
No.
the other things that they said. Man, maybe it was just they were excited. I hope that's what it
I
was.
think it was unfortunately their talent agents,
Excited.
telling them what to do, and I think
Probably
being
so.
misinformed. Well, and this ties in with what we always talk about with the benefits of being a world citizen. Like, look, I mean, yes, I'm biased because I'm Shiv's father, but Leigh, you hear him talk, you hear Carolyn talk, you hear both of your girls, you see how much they've accomplished, and we can attribute a lot of it to the fact that they actually understand many different parts of the world beyond their own cocoon. And I think it's the same thing with Shiv, right? I mean, when we look at the world, I think this is the part that I get a bit concerned about, is that as we get more and more into space, and Shiv, your professor was talking about the fact that there's a realistic, probably a very good likelihood that your generation is going to be living and working in space in a way that no other generation before it has. Would you agree with that?
I would, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, so if that's the case, then we need to be tied in, and not just tied in, but we need to actually be self-aware of the fact that, first of all, people like those ladies who went up in space on Blue Origin, it's a privilege. They paid a lot of money to go into space, and there are a lot of people in this world that don't have that kind of money. That's not where the frontier is. The frontier is the stuff that Shiv's talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Development of new technology. Shiv, you talked about this, and I'm going to tie this into travel because it does apply here. What was one of your arguments for very low Earth orbit? You talked about this. It was low latency something. I forget what it was. Or what was that?
So if you have ever had, trying to give an example, there's sometimes if you have a call with someone, on this side of the world, there's like a little bit of latency. The point of very low Earth orbit is to give low latency. So you have very slow, I guess, lag between radio frequencies. And I use that an example in actually poaching in Africa. I actually talked about that in my presentation. I talked about how in Africa right now they have a problem with communicating over a certain distance with other members of that same group where they do anti-poaching, the same anti-poaching group. Very low Earth orbit can allow them to have low latency broadband internet so they can contact and talk and find these poachers that are around Africa, which is still a big problem as it is. Even with this new generation of equipment and technology, it's still a big problem. But yeah, that was the biggest thing, is that being able to evolve the current technology and current communication technology specifically using very low Earth orbit.
Well, and I have to tell you, when Shiv told me this at first, I thought about what he said because, okay, how do you apply it? And I spent some time out in the bush with anti-poaching patrols. I've actually been out with them. I've seen what they need. Whenever we ask them what they need, we get three requests. We get better GPS trackers because the ones they have can't really survey the land, better military boots, and better radios. Every single time. And we're delivering equipment to probably 4 different countries in Africa with anti-poaching equipment on a regular basis. And you hear this as well. The communication part is really key, right? I mean, there's one side of it, which is that, yes, if you're using any kind of tagging system, then you're actually tagging where you are, and then you are compromising the position of these animals. However, the other side of that is that if there is a low latency broadband where somebody is able to communicate, then it's not just in that area of, let's say, Ruaha National Park in Tanzania, or that area of the Matthews Forest in Kenya, or Kruger National, whatever the case. It's all of them. You could be communicating in Johannesburg, and this is what Shiv's talking about applies. Okay, I've talked to anti-poaching patrols and conservation experts in South Africa, and Zambia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, you name it. Here's where their views digress. One country tried legalizing poaching. One country tried painting rhino horns pink, because if they paint them pink, they'll be less likely to be cut off and poached. One talked about just sawing off the horns completely, because if they do that, nothing there to cut, then nothing to see. And one talked about a shoot to kill. Well, they all had shoot to kill policy. One talked about shoot to kill anybody who uses a snare trap. What if they could all talk to each other in real time at that moment as something happened? And why this is important is because I got to not just meet them, but I met their dogs, bloodhounds. Now, Shiv's a dog lover. For those of you who know, he put together a whole PowerPoint presentation about why we need a dog. What was the dog's name, by the way?
Delta.
Yeah, that's what it was. That's right. It is a good name. Don't encourage him. He's going to college. Don't encourage him.
You need a dog.
Don't encourage him.
No. I tried. I put a lot of effort into that presentation.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
no.
I will. I'll give you.
I'm on your side. I'm on your side.
Thank you.
I'm getting housed right now. Seriously, this is not even cool. Wow, you two must have actually planned this before this, didn't you? Two must have been like, all right, this is how we're gonna put him in his place.
Don't listen to your dad. I got you, Shiv. I got you.
So that's gonna be the lesson for this podcast: is anybody who's young listening, don't listen to your dads. That's the message we're giving. Is that it, Leigh? That's the message we're telling everybody.
No, the message is I'm on your side. You can come to me. I'm an enabler. Just come to me. It's not don't listen to your parents. It's
all right, you heard it here first, folks. That's great. All the people that sit there and skewer me on social media are coming after you now. Yeah. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Our social media team's gonna have a grand old time responding to those guys now. So, when I was talking to Shiv about this, I said, if we have a uniformed approach, and not just in Africa, but a uniformed approach to poaching across continents, it would be so helpful. And here's what I mean. My late father spent time in India with anti-poaching patrols in Periyar National Park in South India. And something that he uncovered that I started just delving into, Periyar National Park had this program to rehabilitate poachers. Not shoot to kill, not put them in jail, but to have a contract with them that says we're going to rehabilitate you to work in tourism. And if you don't actually do this, then we'll take the other actions. That never made its way to any country in Africa. Any ex-poacher, and I've actually interviewed several of them for different articles, any ex-poacher that's working in tourism, it's serendipitously. There's no actual plan to rehabilitate them. With Shiv's idea, what if those anti-poaching patrols in Periyar National Park could talk to the anti-poaching patrols in Kenya, and they could talk to the anti-poaching patrols in Zambia, and one could say, oh, we're doing this. Hey, we tried that. It didn't work. Hey, we're going to paint the horns pink. You know what? We tried that here. Hey, have you guys tried rehabilitating them? Have you guys actually talked to them? This is what we did in Periyar, which you could do here. None of that occurs because of the connections. So that's a huge connection. That's a huge solution that Shiv's talking about in terms of actually creating low latency internet. What else did Shiv? You talked about that. Was there anything else you talked about in your
presentation? Yes. So on the topic of GPSs, you need to have a sort of picture quality. To get a bit of sort of context, right? So if you take your phone and you were to take a picture of something completely down the street that you can barely see with your eyes, and you take a picture with your phone, it's not going to be very clear. If you're a lot closer to it, it's going to be a lot more clear, and that's just how it is. Even with all the technology that's in the Hubble telescope, all this stuff, if you have a satellite in very low Earth orbit, it is right there. You can get real-time data right there. Satellite tracking data right there. Google Maps, you don't need all the cars and everything driving around the cameras on it. You use the satellite and you get everything you need right there.
What's some practical uses for that?
So another context, you've seen Jurassic World where they have trackers on the dinosaurs. Not to say we're going to track, the rhinos and stuff like that, but to get video quality of certain things that might be happening. So let's say there's a poaching going on right now and you need to locate where it's happening. You don't know where it is. That's a solution. That's one of the solutions right there, is being able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's again. Listen to them.
Yeah, I have some questions for Shiv.
Yeah, go. and they're not about dogs, Shiv. Hold on, they're not going to be about dogs.
No, not about dogs. No, in all seriousness, Shiv, I am in my early 60s, and everything you're telling me is impressive, but also almost like something out of a sci-fi movie. But what impresses me the most about what you're telling me is that this is all work you've done in high school, which feels to me like it should be college level stuff. So I feel like you're inspiring a lot of people and inspiring your generation. And what I want to know is, how do young people your age sort of get into this in high school? Is this exceptional that you're able to do this, or is this something that is accessible to high school students everywhere? I mean, I feel like if we can get a jump on it in high school, then by the time you get to college, you're doing advanced work, and by the time you're out of college, you're changing the world. So how does one get started in this?
To get your foot in the door, it's honestly not the easiest thing, especially depends on where you are. Right now, this is kind of a new program that hasn't been around for a very long time, and it's expensive. Even if you use, very basic materials, it's still an expensive operation to do. I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to get my foot in the door, not through high school, but through other connections, through summer camps and stuff like that. So honestly, in a lot of places, it might not be possible to do it in high school. It might be more possible to do it in college because funding is a lot more available in college specifically. Being able to make connections, and I think the biggest thing anyone should take away, whether you have the opportunity to do it or not in high school, is networking, right? So if you can go to functions and you can try connecting with people and being friends with people and being able to connect with their dads, their people, their friends, right? You're able to find connections in which you can do this. You can do something along the lines of there's something that you're interested in, whether it's this or something else. And yeah, so being lucky enough and being in a community where there is funding and they have those opportunities is very important. But then again, like I said, you might have to wait till college and you might have to find opportunities in your community, whether it's again in college or whether it's local.
I
couldn't have said it better. And I would tell you, we yesterday Shiv found a picture of my high school graduation, and he was sending me the photo. And he's like, it's eerily similar. We're both on stage, shaking hand almost the same way. It's all these years apart, and it's what? How many years apart?
When did you graduate?
1995. So is it 40 years apart?
It is.
That's so cool.
40 years apart.
It's funny how DNA works that way, huh?
Yeah, is it amazing or what? And then he found this
Yeah.
picture, and it was there, and it was eerily similar. And as he's saying this, I was just thinking about that photo because, when I was his age, I was designing stuff in AutoCAD. I was into cars, designing stuff in AutoCAD because the idea of doing anything in space just wasn't realistic or even remotely realistic, right? I mean, when I came to this country, the first thing I saw was Challenger exploding. That was the very first experience that I had to space, and then you start learning everything else. Whereas with Shiv, it's part, as he said, it's not easy to do, but it's going to get easier as we go forward. It's going to, as more and more, I mean, we're talking about school districts, not, universities coming down to school districts actually applying this. Imagine taking a science experiment that you're doing in a biology class and putting it up in this CubeSat and sending it up from there. All of a sudden, there's a whole bunch of taking soil samples from a trip to Peru, taking a soil sample from there and sending up and see if the nitrates look any different, or see if something happens, or see whatever the experiments are, right? You could apply this in so many different forms. And I would say why this is so important is because when we talk about not just the power of travel and tourism, but the power of education, why this is important is because you hear how your daughters talk. You hear how Shiv talks. They are, and most of the children at this level, right, that are at Shiv's level, your daughter's level, that are excelling, that actually worked hard. They actually were at the top of their work to be at the top of their class, that took pride in their education, treated it like a career. They are on a different level than we were at their age. On a completely different level. And their kids will be at an even different level. So what that means is that as a society, I know it's hard to see it because of some of the decisions human beings make, but as a society, we are getting smarter and smarter and smarter. Remove politics from this. Remove whatever we see on the TV. We can't be defined by our lowest common denominators. We can't be defined by that. When you hear your daughters talk, you hear Shiv talk, I hear his friends talk, I hear other people we've had in this podcast talk. We had Lisa, for example, talking about powerful women. When you hear people like that talk, and her daughter, who went to Kennedy, to NASA for a space camp almost every summer, and what she's doing, she's interned and worked at a safari camp in Africa as an intern. She's all of these things. You can see that our focus should be at who's excelling, not who's bringing up the rear. Who's excelling? And I know that sounds cruel. I know it sounds, to some, it sounds cruel that, okay, what about my child? I'm not saying we forget children. And I remember there's a slogan George W. Bush said, was it "No Child Left Behind" was his program, right? No child left behind. The answer, I think, is more complicated than "No Child Left Behind." It's actually "No Child Left Unchallenged." Right? It's not left behind. It's no child left unchallenged. And how do you do that? Through travel tourism, through exposing them as global citizens. Shiv, would you say that your travels around the world? Be honest. The stuff you've seen around the world when we travel together, did that have any bearing on your presentation at Kennedy Space Center?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So besides the poaching, I also talked about the natives in Peru, where they don't have barely anything. To be honest with you, they struggle to get proper education. And my dad knows about this, but Keeping the Robot is a initiative that he's helped to fund in order to send robots to educate those kids. And part of that was very low Earth orbit. What if they could have Wi-Fi? What if they could have broadband internet going to that exact location to help educate them and teach them everything about what the real world is about outside of where they live?
Yeah, yeah, he's nailed it. I mean, Shiv and I talked about, if you don't have internet these days, it's like, what's it, Plato's book, The Republic, right? You're all sitting in the cave looking at the shadow of the fire instead of turning around looking at the fire. And actually judging for yourself versus letting somebody else tell you what to think of something. Our next generation they're getting smarter and smarter and smarter, as they should. And if we want to truly invest, then go back and listen to our other episodes, right? We talked about the fact that children who actually are global citizens, world citizens, have a 13% higher test score. They have a quantifiable higher education level. They have a quantifiable higher pay grade. All sorts of things that apply in terms of who they are. And it also is how they present themselves, what they do, how they present themselves, how they explain themselves, how they're able to take something that probably is over both of our heads and take it to a level where, Leigh, you and I understand what he's talking about. And not because we talk to Shiv regularly or because he's on the podcast, but because he's able to understands this concept so well that he's able to explain it to somebody who's not there. And I think that says something. So I wanted to bring Shiv on this podcast. I think it was great to have him on this particular episode again, because we're talking about a paradigm shift. I know I use that word a lot, but it's a paradigm shift in how science is going to be done going forward in schools, right? It's not going to be tests and experiments done in beakers. It's going to be done in one by one little, what'd you call them? Little cubes,
CubeSats.
right? CubeSats.
Cube.
Mm-hmm.
Timeshares.
I thought we were going to talk about Legos when we got started.
Well, folks, if you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe you can find us on YouTube or on any of your social media platforms. You can find us on whatever streaming app you use to listen to podcasts. Make sure, if you like what you've heard, subscribe, check out all the other episodes we've done. We'd love to have you listening to us. And if you want to join the conversation, feel free. Take a look at our shorts, take a look at our YouTube reels, take a look at our Instagram reels, feel free to comment on them. I'll warn you, if you want to take shots at me or Leigh, our social media guys are pretty funny. They're ready with some puns to come back to you with. But if you want to join the conversation, by all means, please, it's there. Leigh, what'd you think?
I loved it. I'm so encouraged, and if Shiv, if you ever feel like you need a different parent, I will be your mom. I would be proud to be your mother, and I will get you a dog. So, just know that you've got a backup if anything goes sideways ever,
Sweet.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead.
It was great. I loved it, and I'm very proud of you, Shiv, and thank you for sharing your insight and wisdom. And I hope we get to talk to you again. And best of luck. Congratulations. Best of luck as you head off to college. You're going to do big things.
Thank you.
Well, Junior, thanks again for joining us. It was
absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. It was an honor to be on here again, talking about Katy Perry's downfall and everything else like that. So it's awesome.
I kissed the ground and I liked it.
Yeah.
On that note, thanks for listening, everybody. Remember, big successes come in small places. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Sustainable Voice. If you have a success story of your own, please reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.